Yo, what's good everybody on YouTube? It's your boy AnnoyingTV, and today I will be pointing out the noticeable differences in defense in NBA 2K18 and NBA 2K17. So the first thing I want to start off with is the bumping animations. You guys know that bump animation in NBA 2K17 when you just run into a defender and they'll call a blocking foul or charge foul just because of the fact that you hit turbo running too hard into the defender. That animation is now out of the game, so you will no longer be called a charging foul or a blocking foul, straight off strictly defense, which I think is really nice. They still have, of course, charge fouls in the game. They made baseline a lot much more easier to defend. The sideline cheese where users would just walk the baseline without hitting turbo, it will now make them post up. There's also a big difference that I saw in the defensive settings that was not in the game in NBA 2K17. And it's that you can change the intense defense in your settings. So you guys have a bar, you guys know that bar in your settings where you can increase it from 0 to 100. That would now be allowed on defense, on intense defense. Another thing that was very noticeable was last year you didn't have like a defensive grade that will tell you like how you defended a player. This year in NBA 2K18, if you heavily contested a shot, it will pop up on your screen heavily contested. It will also pop up lightly contested if it was lightly contested, and also late contest, which I think is very good, because if it's heavily contested, it makes you know that the shot is most likely not going to drop, and I feel like that was definitely something we needed. Also, there's no defensive bar in NBA 2K18. As you guys know from last year, there was a defensive bar that would go from green, yellow, or red to let you know how you defended an opponent. But in NBA 2K18, the defensive meter is now gone. There's a lot more bumping animations as well, and you also fall on less ankle breakers. So I think it's very, very good that NBA 2K finally developed defensive mechanics that allows you to actually have control in your player. One thing that I noticed was a big difference was in the NBA 2K17, when you leave a defender, it kind of pulls you like a magnetic pull, and that also goes for screens as well. Like it kind of like drags you and slides you away from the defender. That is also fixed in NBA 2K18. You will have better control of your player from sliding and getting crossed off certain animations, which I think is lovely. Because last year a lot of people would just spam dribble moves until they got an ankle breaker animation, but this year it's actually really hard to break ankles. Now, a big problem in NBA 2K17 that's very controversial was the steal success. A lot of people think that they needed to be toned up. A lot of people think it was just fine. In NBA 2K18, they've actually made it harder for you to get a steal success, okay? As I said before, as I said it on Twitter, you guys can follow me on Twitter, link will be in the description. As I said before, that there's less bump steals. You know how when you run into a defender and they just automatically just strip the ball from you, that animation is no longer effective, but you can still reach, but they'll call more fouls than they'll call actual steals, okay? Another noticeable thing I noticed on offense, you guys, was a lot of you guys were discussing if there's any hot spots. Like, is your player going to be able to shoot hot spots? Is there a red ring underneath your player? The answer is yes and no, okay? When I looked at certain players' hot spots, there were hot zones, but there's no red ring indicator underneath your player that allows you to tell those hot zones, okay? But there is a fire indicator for when you get hot. So like in NBA 2K14, most of you guys remember how there was a fire indicator next to your name. That emblem is actually back, as well as the ice. If you're cold, it has a little ice, the little frost emoji right next to your name, which I think is very cool. Another thing I wanted to discuss was the dunking animations. I know a lot of you guys were saying that it was less effective to dunk in NBA 2K17. In NBA 2K18, I used James Harden, and James Harden has silver posterizer, and I was getting pretty decent good contact dunk animations on silver posterizer. So that just makes me think, like, if there was players in the game, if Hall of Fame badges on posterizer will be overpowered or not. I definitely think that the archetype slasher, if they do bring it back, will be a used position this year, because last year in NBA 2K17 it really wasn't that effective, but I think it's going to be great in NBA 2K18. Also, another thing that I noticed, you guys, was the free throws, okay? When you shoot a free throw, it will now show you the percentage and chance of it going in, okay? So if I shoot a free throw, it will say 87%, 60%, etc. And if it shows that, that means I have an 87% chance of the ball going in and a 60% chance of the ball going in. I really like this new feature, how they actually tell you, because I didn't think that the grades were much effective. You guys know how like you would get a B+ or A on the release and you'll still miss it, and sometimes you'll just wonder and just be thinking like, yo, like why'd I miss the shot? But now it will actually tell you the free throw percentage, which I think is really dope. Now I know that you guys were complaining how last year how the screens were effective, like they were too effective. I played as I said before on Twitter, you guys, link in the description. As I said before on Twitter, we played the game for 6 to 8 hours, and I used players who had gold brick wall, not Hall of Fame brick wall, but gold brick wall, and I didn't fall one time, okay? Now they did say they rewrote the whole entire screen script, which means that they like it's way much easier to get around screens. But as I said before, I didn't fall one time. I do kind of like the screen system. I think that they need to keep it, but brick wall is just not as effective as it was in NBA 2K17. And I felt like, me personally, I just felt like NBA 2K17 how it was overpowered. Now a lot of you guys were discussing rebounding, okay? Now rebounding in NBA 2K17, it was pretty decent to me. I think there was a lot of stuff they could have fixed, but in NBA 2K18, one noticeable difference that I know is that when you tip the ball, you guys know the rebound animation when you tip it out. In NBA 2K17, there was a big problem to when you tip it out, the ball will most likely go out of bounds. In NBA 2K18, it's much easier to save the ball when the ball is tipped out to you. That's one thing that I noticed. Also, there's I wouldn't say a new animation, but something else that I noticed is that after you get a rebound, some centers hold the ball in the air so that it can't get ripped. Now, I don't think that's something you can control. I just think that it depends on what certain type of rebound animation that you get. But I definitely think it's cool that centers can hold the ball in the air, because sometimes they will bring the ball low, which wouldn't make any sense, and they'll get stripped easily. And speaking about stealing, there's a new animation in the game to when if you both dive for the ball, you'll fight for it, okay? So just like how in Madden, you guys know when there's a fumble on the floor and everybody dives on top of the fumble, that's basically how it will be in NBA 2K18. But there won't be anything like you can spam A to get the ball or something. I don't know how it determines who gets the ball, but I do know that you can scrap for it and the ball can like tip while you're on the floor, okay? A lot of you guys were discussing badges in NBA 2K17, and you guys were asking me like, yo, Annoyin, are there any new badges in NBA 2K18? As I was playing the game and I was checking players' badges, I did not see any new badge. For the most part, it was the same, like ankle breaker, brick wall, you know. I know a lot of you guys were discussing, is there interceptor? No, there's no interceptor in the game. There's no scrapper. There's none of the old badges from NBA 2K16. But for the most part, after all the characters I saw, the badges were exactly. Also, one more thing, a lot of you guys were asking me about Lonzo Ball's jump shot in NBA 2K18. Is it nice? Does it look good? Does it drop? I actually forgot to check Lonzo's badges. I apologize, but Lonzo's jump shot is a normal release, okay? I definitely don't think that it will be used in park or etc. because it's not quick enough. But if you guys like normal releases, it's pretty good. It looks exactly like the recreated shot that some other YouTubers have on NBA 2K17. Another thing that I noticed on defensive switching was that on screens, you guys know how arrows change. It still takes a long time for the arrow to change, but like as I said before, that there's less magnetic pull, so you don't get pulled as much, but the defense is definitely improved. Also, you can also dribble around bump animations, which I think is pretty cool. You don't really get stopped anymore, so if you're a dribble head from now on, you can like dribble around bumps. Which another new feature in NBA 2K18 is screen shaking, okay? One thing that I noticed was that when the game gets down to a close wire and the game is very close, within the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, the screen will be shaking just because of the intensity of the crowd and etc. You also get to silence the crowd after you score the ball, which I think is a really dope feature. I think it's a little bit too excessive, because after you silence the crowd, sometimes the next possession the crowd will start shaking again. If you ask me personally, it's the same shake as the free throw shake, so the whole game will be shaking for the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. But as I said before, if you're not nervous, you can silence the crowd, and it'll also vibrate your controller as well, so it can kind of throw you off. But I definitely think that's a dope feature they added to the game, and I'm willing to see who's gonna fold under pressure and who's not. One more thing, you guys, in NBA 2K18 that I noticed was the substitutions menu and the zone menu. So in order to substitute players and call different zones, it's now button press, so you can hit X and circle to substitute players, and you can hit X or circle or triangle to also call zones instead of flicking the direction of your stick a certain way, which I think is really cool, really dope feature, and it makes it really easier. Anyway, you guys, it's your boy AnnoyingTV. Those were the last noticeable differences I've known about NBA 2K18. If I forgot anything, you guys let me know in the comment section. I'll speak about it. Again, we could only play quick game. I don't know about any other game modes, or even if they're in the game, such as Pro-Am, MyPark, My Career, and everything else. But anyway, it's your boy AnnoyingTV. Make sure you guys leave a like, comment, subscribe. How do you guys feel about NBA 2K18, man? Are you guys excited or what? I'm out.